Welcome to Misguided Souls with Shadows of the Paranormal on Z Talk Radio. Dreams speak to us on deep levels. Through dreaming, we open a gateway to our inner world. Through lucid dreaming, we open to conscious interactions with the surroundings, happenings, and living beings within the dreamscape. We'll explore this dreamscape with Dawn Baumann Brunke, who is an animal communicator, editor, and an author who specializes in writings about healing, metaphysics, and spirituality. She has published over 36 interviews, including talks with natural medicine writer Dr. Andrew Weil and former NASA consultant Richard Hoagland. Her books also include Animal Voices, Animal Teachings, Animal Guides, Shape-Shifting with Our Animal Companions, and the Animal Wisdom Tarot. In addition, Dawn is also the author of Who Lives Here?, a series of animal and nature books for children. In just a few minutes, we'll invite Dawn on to talk about her latest, Dreaming with Polar Bears, Spirit Journeys with Animal Guides. Brunke presents techniques she learned to enter shared dreamscapes and form meaningful dream relationships with other species. Sharing ways to recall dreams and engage lucid dream awareness, Dawn shows how dream work can help us forge deeper connections with the natural world and move more consciously in planetary evolution with all beings. Get your animal side on. In just a few short minutes, join us on Misguided Souls with Shadows of the Paranormal right after this quick commercial break.
Nurse, set up an IV. And you, her boyfriend, you were the driver?
Yes, doctor, but I didn't mean to hurt her. I only had a few drinks. I was just buzzed.
Just buzzed? Oh, then your girlfriend is fine.
Hey, sweetie. I feel great.
She's really okay?
What, are you kidding? No, not really. Nurse, get me a suture kit. Stat.
Buzzed driving. Maybe we should stop acting like it's no big deal. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Ad Council.
It was just one time. I thought it would be okay.
I would have asked him to get tested. But I didn't want him to think I didn't trust him.
I didn't know I could catch it on the playground. We were in love, so I didn't think about it.
All I did is trade Lunchables.
Every year, 2 million kids are infected with cooties.
Why didn't you tell me, baby?
I thought cooties were something that happened to other kids.
Cooties! I just wanted to play tag. I never thought I'd be it.
And the numbers are growing.
I blame myself.
I made a big mistake.
And even though a vaccine is available,
Circle, circle, dot, dot, now you're at the cootie shop.
most children never get inoculated.
You may have cooties and not even know it. I wish someone had told me.
Speak to your kids about cooties before cooties speaks to them first.
What do I do now?
We're back on Misguided Souls with Shadows of the Paranormal. And without further ado, let's welcome our guest, writer Dawn Baumann Brunke. It is such a pleasure to have you here, Dawn.
Well, thanks. Nice to be here.
And you're a first-time guest on the program, and we like to start off with a little background info, but on your website, I noticed that you had the media version, so to speak, of you. So let's drop the interview formalities just for a moment and tell us about the non-media, the real Dawn.
The real Dawn? Oh my goodness.
A lot of pressure, I know.
Well, not sure how real you want me to be.
Oh,
I'm
as real as possible.
I'm a writer. I live in Alaska. I'm also an animal communicator, which means I work with humans kind of trying to translate their thoughts, feelings, and perceptions of their animals. So that's one of my day jobs. And then I am an author of 5 different books, so usually I have a project going on that I'm writing, and I kind of balance those 2 things. I have a husband and a daughter and a dog, and I enjoy Alaska. I enjoy being in the outdoors and hiking and things like that.
And I know that you're in Alaska right now, and it's today is a gorgeous day on my side of the coast here. It's New York. It couldn't be any better of a day for this time of year, and I imagine it's probably a little bit colder on your end. How did you end up in Alaska? I'm just wondering.
Basically, my husband. I met my husband in Hawaii, of all places, and we lived there for about a year. And then when we got married, we moved to Wisconsin, which is where I'm from, and lived there for about 4 years. But for every single day of those 4 years, I heard about Alaska. So finally, I just said, I give up. Let's go to Alaska. And I love it. We've lived here about 20 years, and I really love this state a lot.
Well, God bless you, because from what I know, it's supposed to work happy wife, happy life, not happy husband, move to Alaska. But you could save that for a whole nother conversation in itself. And before you said you're talking with animals, and I'm sure you've been called maybe an animal whisperer before, and clearly you seem to have a special connection with animals. And I'm just wondering, when did you first realize that you had that connection and there was maybe some form of communication between you and animals?
Well, I think, when I was younger, and I've talked to a lot of other animal communicators about this, I think as children we're a little bit more open to that, and it doesn't seem so weird.
Right,
and then, we start to go to school and things change. But for me, my opening with animals in this way was actually first as a journalist. When I first came to Alaska, I was hired to be the editor of a health and wellness magazine. And one of the articles I was editing was written by a woman here in Alaska who is an animal communicator, and I thought, whoa, there is such a thing. It was just really fascinating to me that there were these people who supposedly communicated with animals. So I basically eventually interviewed her, and I was so fascinated by the whole thing because she seemed to me a very grounded individual, and she explained things in a very grounded way. And it was just kind of a thing that snowballed for me. I ended up interviewing about two dozen communicators all over the U.S., and that's kind of how I wrote my first book, was just learning what this thing called animal communication is all about, and if we could actually speak to animals, what kinds of things would they tell us, and how does it work? And I just had 1,000,001 questions. And it was during the writing of that book that I just had an experience and opened kind of spontaneously to what these people had been telling me of how it worked. It was just an inner hearing. It happened to be some birds that came to this big berry bush outside my window in my office, and I experienced that of what's that like to connect intuitively, telepathically with a different species, and I just when you get that experientially, then you sort of get it. It's different than people telling you what it's like, and so that literally changed my life for sure.
In my image, I just have you're on all fours, you're talking to the dog, you're talking to them, but it doesn't really sound like it's like that. It's not like you talk, they understand you, they talk, you understand them. You said it's more intuitive from what you were saying?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
I would say it's more intuitive, yeah.
What do you mean?
For me, it's just a connection. Really, if you think of it energetically, you're connecting with the energy of an animal. Think of it this way. You go to a coffee shop and you sit down with your friend and you ask how he is, and he says fine, and you hear in his tone that he's not fine. So, you just understand things intuitively, energetically about people. And it's the same with animals. You can learn how to focus your consciousness in such a way that you attune to that animal, and you're able to understand what's going on. Now, again, I've had 15, 20 years of this, so I've developed my own little system of how it works for me, of how I'm able to translate those feelings, those thoughts, those perceptions of that animal to human words. Obviously, the animals are speaking to me in English. And I very much think of myself as a translator. That's kind of what I'm doing, is I'm translating that energy, those perceptions into human speech so that other humans can understand.
And I know you've totaled what you've learned into I know you do workshops as well. Give us for animal communication, just kind of give us a small, quick walkthrough of what one of these sessions is like to establish that type of connection.
What an animal communication talk is like?
Yeah, because you do workshops, and I'm just wondering, people come in, they probably ask you, how do I do this? So kind of give them a little tips on what they do if someone said, I want to come to your presentation.
Okay, well, first I help people quiet down. That's the first big hurdle, because everybody, our culture is very, very gotta do it now, gotta do this, gotta do that. We like to multitask, all that fast-moving energy. And one of the first things I teach is slowing down, which is more animal-like in many ways. It's learning to center yourself, learning to find that a more authentic version of who you are, rather than just your superficial idea of who you are or who you want to present in the world. And tuning into that. So it's kind of listening to that small, still voice within. And then opening, learning how to connect energetically. We do it with people, we do it with partners first, and then with animals, and learning how to connect with a living animal, with an animal through photographs, and animal with nature in general. I mean, that's another great one to do. So it's experiential. The workshops I teach are two days, so it's a gradual, just kind of slowing down and centering is really what I would say is it's all about.
With animals, it's hard for me not to imagine that humans and animals think very differently. So this is kind of like, I guess, a two-part question. If there are, what are the major differences between thinking and understanding with animals? And then secondly, let's start there. Is there a major difference between those different thought processes between the human and the animal?
And I would say, first off, just acknowledge humans are animals too.
Yes, excuse me. You know what I mean.
We all have different ways of perceiving the world. Now, for example, I think when I'm doing a conversation with a cat or a dog, they know our world. It's kind of similar, they understand our timing, our gyrations, they understand the things we do. So it's a little bit easier to talk with an animal who understands that. If you're talking with, for example, I don't know, a squid or an octopus who lives in a completely different world, then you're dealing with a very different perception of reality. I'd also say, and this is just, I have to answer this question very generally because there's so many different variations and so many different variations basically. There's so many different species on our planet. But I just lost what I was going to say.
Well, I was going to say that was my next part. Is that the next part of that question was? So we know that you were saying that animals and humans think differently. There's an understanding process. Now, within then, do different variations of animals think differently in themselves? Like they have, like a squid has its own thought of process, thinking. They thinks differently than from, say, a bear.
Yeah, of course, because we all have different brains, different software, of how we perceive reality. So yeah, a squid is going to perceive reality so much differently than a bear. Think of an earthworm. An earthworm is feeling the dirt, and it's a very intimate body contact, whereas an eagle is perceiving mainly from the sky and very visual. So some animals tend to be very visual, some are very kinesthetic, some are very hearing oriented. So yeah, there's just this huge huge spectrum of different ways of perceiving reality.
I just always find it really interesting when someone with the things that you do kind of use the education in their background. I know you have a BA in comparative religion and symbolic anthropology, so you probably see more than most people how humans and animals, squids, all that type of stuff, there is shared personality traits. Even though anthropomorphists, we put human qualities on animals, but it happens kind of both ways. There are animal qualities inside of humans too.
Yeah, sure, of course. And, just going back to my background, I think maybe that really is why I'm a little bit more comfortable with this, even in the very beginning, because in college my real focus was different religions and how different religions perceive the divine. So I've always been interested in the spiritual aspect of things. And in a way that's very similar for me, for how I think about how different animals perceive reality. It's different paradigms, different ways of interacting with the world, different brain softwares, different sensing mechanisms. So that's fascinating. To me, that's really incredibly fascinating. How we all live in one world, but we're all perceiving it in very different ways and interacting with it in different ways.
Yeah, it is really such a fascinating topic, and unfortunately, obviously, we only have limited time, so I really want to get into the different aspects of your brand new book, Dreaming with Polar Bears, Spirit Journeys with Animal Guides. Share your inspiration for writing the book, and where did it all begin, pretty much?
Well,
and I know it steps back way back.
It's a kind of a long answer, so I'm glad we have an hour here.
We got plenty of time, please.
It actually began with dreams. So I had a really, and I've always been interested in dreams, really fascinated with dreams. I've kept a dream journal, for a long, long time, and have done a lot of different experiments with my dreams, just because I'm fascinated. So quite a number of years ago, I was on a cruise ship, actually, with my sister, and I had a dream. I woke up in my dream. I was lucid, aware that I was dreaming, and I saw two screens of consciousness, and one was my sleeping body on the ship, and on the other side of consciousness was this little dog, and the dog was introducing himself to me. He told me his name was Little High Top, and it was just so funny in the dream. He lives within a mother and a father and a son and a boy and a girl, and he tells me he gets his name because when he first came to live with the family, they put him in the boy's high top sneaker, and they just thought that was funny. They took a photograph of him, and they started calling him that. So there's all these details in this dream about this dog, and eventually, I'm just going to kind of give you the short story here. Eventually, I understand that this dog is dreaming. That this is not a part of me. This is not a projection that I'm having in my dream. This is actually a dog that somehow is connected to me in my dreams. That was really fascinating to me, the idea that you could share consciousness in dreams.
Well, how did you know that? I'm just wondering, because it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to know it. How did you know it was real on the other end?
Well, I shouldn't say it was. I knew 100% of the time. I was fascinated by this. I had a very good intuitive sense that this was not just a dream, that this was some kind of sentient being that was connecting with me in my dream. So it was a feeling. I don't have proof. I didn't get his name and address. So.
Yeah, because I was wondering, how can you really validate these things? I believe what you're saying, but what you think about what the critic is saying. How can you really validate it?
Right. Well, and you can. I don't know that you can. Maybe at some point in our future we'll be able to technologically do that. But I will just say that dream had a strong impression on me. It began the idea in me. It's possible to connect with another dreamer, and there are other people in the dream field that talk about co-dreaming with other humans. I don't know a lot to do with animals, but that's something that's been written about in different dream journals and things. Anyway, that dream was just sort of like a little tease almost. It was about a year later that I had a second dream, and in this dream I'm also lucid, and I'm sitting on an airplane, and there's a man that sits down next to me, or there's a seat between us, but anyway, he sits next to me, and he tells me he's a professor of dreamology, and that he's come to Alaska to teach about this special kind of dreaming. And later on in the dream, I wake up, and I become lucid, and I realize, I had this dream about Little High Top. And what was interesting about it is that I'm sitting in the airplane, I'm looking out the window, and I'm seeing these incredible clouds, because it's morning, there are these pink golden clouds. And my brain is saying, I'm thinking, isn't that strange? There's this world of light clouds out here, and if I just kind of shifted my consciousness a little bit, I could become a cloud, or I could go out and feel what the clouds are like, and yet inside this plane are these, sleepy passengers, and it's dark, and it's very sedate. And that woke me up inside my dream. That made me realize or remember that dream about Little High Top, about those two screens of awareness. So anyway, this was a very long dream. I don't want to get into all the details, but I'll just tell you that I told the professor this dream. I mean, it's strange, isn't it? I'm awake within a dream, telling a dream professor about another dream. It was very kind of convoluted and knotted up, but it was exhilarating at the same time. And he brought out a bunch of photos from a briefcase in front of him, and he handed me one, and it was a picture of a little dog. And I realized, oh yeah, that could be the dog in my dream. And I turned the photo over, and it said Little High Top. So
Wow.
I freaked out in the dream. I'm thinking, this is too strange. My dream is messing with me. It's telling me all these strange things. And anyway, the conversation unfolded, and there was a lot of sharing there about how he was kind of connected to this. It's almost like a whole backstory emerged. But at the very end of the dream, the plane has landed, and we're standing in the aisle, and the professor reaches into his coat pocket and he hands me an invitation. And I realize in the dream that, this is an invitation, and I can either accept it or not. There's not going to be a bad thing either way. And I reach to open it, and when I open it, he kind of leans close to me, whispers in my ear the words that are on the card, which say, "Dreaming with polar bears."
Wow.
So that's where the title of the dream came from. And so again, this was another significant dream for me. It was connected with that first one I told you about, and I felt it was a very powerful message for my dream, which was saying to me, here's an invitation. Do you want to take it or not? Do you want to dream with polar bears? And so I'm thinking in my waking life, what does that mean, dreaming with polar bears? It's one thing to dream about an animal, but to dream with an animal, what does that really mean? And that's really kind of what started my whole journey about co-dreaming with another species. So
this invitation you got, a lot of times in dreams there's symbols. In this one, it's pretty straightforward. They're sending you an invitation with an invitation. Where did this talk about the next step? It says we're going to dream with polar bears. How did that actually start now?
Okay, well, yeah, it was a conscious decision in my waking world. I thought, okay, do I want to do that? Do I want to dream with polar bears? I don't really know what it means, but yes, I do want to do that. I mean, for me, it was pretty amazing to get this invitation from my subconscious, from my dream world. So yes, I wanted to do that. I didn't know what it would be. There was nothing I prepared or nothing I tried to do, but I did. Within probably, I think, a week or two, I started to have this dream, and it was a recurring dream that happened that went on for about a year. Sometimes I'd have it just once a month or so. Sometimes I'd have it every couple of weeks. It was a very, very simple dream. I was in the high Arctic, meaning snow, ice, water, and I'm walking shoulder to shoulder beside a polar bear, and we're just walking. That's all it is. That's all the dream is. Sometimes the land would be different. Sometimes the ice and the sky would be different. It was always just this movement, just this walking side by side beside this polar bear. So that was the dream. I called it a seed dream because it was kind of small and self-contained, and it wasn't a dream. It didn't feel like my normal dreams, which kind of have a lot of characters and a lot of color, and I usually figure them out and play with symbology and things like that. This seemed very different. And like I said, it went on for about a year, and during that time I thought, I wonder why polar bears, why bears, why am I dreaming about this? I went back through all my journals, and I've kept a dream journal since I was about 12 years old. I started looking at bear dreams, and I found I actually had quite a few. So it was an interesting period in my life where I was, reading, kind of going back in my dream world, and reading about all these dreams that I have had with bears that kind of led up to this event. So I'm tying things together and understanding how to weave. Then I had two dreams near the end of this year, which were neither of them were lucid dreams. They were both polar bears, and significant things happened in them where I realized I was kind of opening up to this, up to whatever this meant, this dream with, and that shifted. And then I had the final dream, the final sea dream, if you will, of walking beside that polar bear in the high Arctic. Again, walking shoulder to shoulder, and I become aware. I become very aware, almost step by step, that we're walking paw foot, and something's happening, and I realize I'm dreaming. I've had this dream before. And I turn my head, and I put my hand on the polar bear's shoulder, and I look into his eyes. And in that moment, I shift gears, I shift perspective, and I'm in his head, looking at me. So I'm seeing myself in the dream from his perspective, and I realize he's dreaming. He's awake within a dream, and I'm awake within my dream, and somehow we're meeting each other.
And you just referenced lucid dreaming, and so it seems like that both of you, both the human and the animal, are dreaming lucidly. I've always really wanted to do that. We're going to come back to polar bears in a second. I just want to take a quick digression. Just give some people some quick tips for lucid dreaming, because I've only had it one time in my life, and I thought it was the thrill of a lifetime, and I've been trying to do it since then, but I just can't do it, quite frankly, and I really want some tips for it.
Well, I wish I could give you tips. I mean, there's
you better give me some tips.
I don't lucid dream on command, and I don't necessarily always try to get myself to lucid dream. With me, it was just very organic, and I also just love lucid. I mean, I think it's really fun, and have done it, throughout my life at different. But I don't particularly have a tip for you. I'm sorry, other than maybe thinking about it before you go to bed, or being excited about it. I don't know if you keep a dream journal or not, but I feel like that's a very important thing. Is that the more we kind of put a little bit of work into working with our dreams, the more they reward us. We begin to open up a conversation, if you will, between our waking world and our dream world, and I think that encourages and things like lucid dreaming and interacting with our dream in more meaningful ways.
I couldn't agree more with you. Dreaming, to me, is interactive. I do keep a dream log. I've been doing that for the past year or so, and it has opened up so many insights into my thinking that is there, but it allows you to interact with your own mind. So I'm a really big believer in following the dreams, and that tells you kind of where you want to go, or at least what you're thinking about something. With the polar bear, to get back to it, do you think, I've heard that everyone has a specific animal guide, a kindred animal spirit. Do you agree with that? And then also, do you think the polar bear is your kindred animal spirit, if so?
Okay, so those are good questions. I think we have guides with us at different periods of our life. There's different philosophies here. And if some people say you have one animal guide for your entire life, that might be your child guide, that might be your animal guide that stays and protects you, and you develop a relationship with it or not. And then sometimes I think animals as teachers, maybe for a specific time within our life. Maybe you're going through a traumatic event, and deer comes to kind of calm you. And you begin to see deer, to dream of deers. So I think animal guides in that sense. We interact with them in different ways. Number one, lifelong guides. Number two is specific teaching guides. Sometimes you're just out about, and you need to know something, and you see a raven flying across the sky, and you get a big message about that. So that's another aspect of animal teachers or animal messengers. For me, the polar bear. I've always polar bears, but I never had a special necessarily attachment to them. It was really only in going back in my dreams and realizing that I had polar bears before, and bears in general, but also polar bears, that it became special to me. Why is it this time in my life that polar bears came up? I was dealing with dreaming and dealing with different things that were going in my life. Probably a lot of answers there as to the why and the when. But yeah, I'd say definitely through writing this book and through the dreams, I've become, very close with polar bears. Yeah, I love them. I love their energy. I love their humor. We Americans, I would say, have a lot of projections on polar bears, and we've gone historically, from really kind of demonizing them all, to putting them on a pedestal a little bit, and sometimes in the face of global warming, or a lot of kids have polar bear teddy bears type of thing. So we have a lot of different projections on polar bears. For me, part of this journey was learning to understand really life from the perspective of without all those human projections on them. And that's a very different thing.
Yeah, it's a whole nother perspective. And the process, the dreams with the polar bear, they progressed over time. They changed. They seemed to be it seemed to grow more intense as it went on. Talk about how it changed over time. You not only did you just walk with one bear, it became so much more.
Yeah, it did. Relationship, really with this polar bear, and you're right. It evolved. Even when I'm speaking about this now, I'm thinking some people are going to think this is so crazy.
Yeah, it's out there.
It sounds really crazy when I'm speaking about it, but the whole process, was not as long, and it was very organic for me. It wasn't like one day I just woke up and thought, oh, I'm going to write this book about dreaming with polar bears. It was a very step-by-step thing leading to another, sometimes deepening with that. I probably, the series of dreams that are recounted within this book took place over about 2 years. And there were periods where I just got, a little too weirded out. Even I became too skeptical of it, and I just needed time away, for a number of months just to kind of ground myself and let it evolve. So I would definitely say this is, in a sense, advanced dreaming, and it was something something that very much did evolve. And you almost have to go kind of step by step with it to get how it evolved and the meaning associated with it. And so many different things came out. You mentioned the one bear. Yes, there was the one bear, but a group of bears, and I kind of call them like the polar bear contingent or the polar bear
the UN
group. Excuse me?
The UN, I believe you called it, the UN of bears.
The UN. The polar bear UN. Anyway, this group of spirit bears, and those I did not perceive as spirit bears, and they kind of had this whole outlook on part of their medicine, if you will, in the Native American sense of every animal has a they bring to the planet. These polar bears spoke about dreaming, about conscious dreaming, and about how they connected with the Arctic people of old, the shamans and the dreamers, and how they had a much more a deeper relationship that was rooted in the dream world. And so they shared that history. So I would get history, I would get lessons in dreams, I would get challenges to learn how to move in and out of dreams, how to bring dreams into waking life, things like that. It's not like it was one or evolved. It was many different paths that kind of intertwined and then evolved in a larger way, if that makes sense.
Oh, it definitely does. And
yeah.
We're not going to reveal every aspect of the book, particularly with the Polar Bear Council, because there's so much really interesting, meaty information there to chew on. But just to give a general idea of why the polar bears were contacting you, talk about why they were contacting you, and then also they told you that they had their own type of jobs. They had a specific thing that they were kind of put on here to do. Talk about that there as well.
Okay. Well, yeah, so, they were very much concerned with, number one, the fate of the world, and number two, kind of reestablishing this connection with humans, both to dream large, to consciously dream, and I think as a challenge and an entreaty to humans to become more aware, not so superficial, and to really find our deep and to find our connection with nature, and not just to pay that lip service, but to really connect with nature and realize that what we are doing, whatever we do, is affecting everyone. So, just to backtrack a little, why did they pick me? I think it was several reasons. Number one, I was very interested in dreaming, and I think part of me must have been, putting forth the question, what else can you do in dreaming? Because that's really very much my experience for the past 40 years or so. And number two, I think it has to do with my my books and my connection with animal communication. So I'm comfortable with the idea of being a translator, if you will, and of sharing their story. In some ways, I kind of got them, right? To tell their story and to translate these experiences and share with them. But the polar bears were also very much, they very much wanted me to be also more responsible, to ask them deep questions, to convey things, to practice things in dreams, and really to form a relationship, not only with them, but with my dreaming self and with my deeper self, So it was a lot of things. Again, kind of like how you evolution of the path. It was all of these things and more. And if you read the book, I hope it comes across as it was a process. It was a very one thing kind of leads you here, and then that might lead you here, and things twist and turn. It's not a linear of a journey. It was it was a spirit journey. That's why the subtitle, It was a spirit journey.
Before we said that we're not really going to reveal all of the stuff in the book because there's so many different interesting facets of it. But one part about it that I want to talk about, particularly with the Polar Bear Council, when they were talking about their jobs, who they've interacted with, the polar bears, and at one point you talk about how they were in touch with the quote-unquote deep people, and you don't really go into it that much into the book, so I want to explore this a little bit more just briefly. Talk about the deep people and how they relate to the polar bears.
Well, the way I understand it is polar bears, they talk of themselves often as bridgers. They bridge the land with the water and the ice, and the water with the sky. I know that sounds, a little strange, but...
Well, you're in the right show for it, so you don't have to worry. You're in the right show to talk about weird stuff, so don't worry.
Okay. Well, in terms of the deep people, what they meant was... how to translate this exactly? Is the deep spirits of the earth, and sometimes that would be the beings or the people. They would call them people, but meaning the spirits of the ocean, and of even below that of the deep earth. So there's this kind of consciousness, if you will, of our planet that is separated. And I've heard other animals refer to this too. There's kind of a consciousness of the land and of the water, and of the deep people would be the deeper, in reference to the polar bears, the deeper water beings. And sometimes the deep earth, and just a deeper consciousness of our planet, of how we're evolving, and of how we're interacting between those worlds. So the polar bears were very much, as I said, about bridging and about connecting kind of off-world energies with deep-world energies. And they did refer to that more often a little bit more than I put in the book. There was just so much, I needed to kind of edit and choose here what was going to work. But they did often speak about that connection between off-world energies and deep-world energies. Yeah. And also, just as a PS, for them being at the top of the world, that's the way they would say it. We're the beings at the top of the world. We hold the world together. And that was a phrase I heard from another animal communicator many, many, many years ago. She also referred to the polar bears in that way, and I didn't really know what she meant. But the polar bears referred to that in the sense of they're very much connected with magnetic energies. And the magnetic energy is higher on the pole than it is in other places. So, oops, sorry about that.
No, not fun. I wouldn't worry about that. I'll edit that one out. How about that?
Yeah, okay. So anyway, they're very much about bridging and about connecting those energies. Yeah.
It's really fascinating, and don't worry, you can go off and get as crazy about these answers as you want. You're definitely in a comfortable show to be doing that. So feel free to go off. But I was wondering, you're doing lucid dreaming, you're doing all the co-dreaming, all these different types of it, and so you're obviously very involved with dreaming, and I'm just wondering, did life become a bit more mundane and boring from doing this, or did you have more of a thirst to actually live your life while you were awake?
Wow. So the question is, what is the question?
I'm wondering, did life, real life, not your dreams, when you were actually awake, your waking life, so to speak, did your life did it feel more boring and mundane? Or when you were actually awake, did you just have a thirst to live even more?
That's really an interesting question. And the way I'm going to answer it is, it was, my interest was more about connecting the dream world with the waking world. So being more fluid in moving between the two. I definitely wouldn't say waking life became more boring. If anything, more exciting, because I started to pick up on visual, well, not only visual, but I started to pick up on the symbolic element in life, in waking life, and connect it with my dreams. So I think for me it was a lesson in being more fluid, in connecting the dream world with the waking world. And that's a lot of what the polar bears were talking about, of being what they call conscious dreamers, which is kind of like being awake in your dreams and connecting with the dream world while waking, you know. And so you have that fluidity between the two, and you have a paw in both worlds, so to speak, and you can bring those worlds together in a more consciously connected way.
Did life become more dreamlike, or did dreaming become more lifelike?
Right, I would say it's both. It's both. You know, working in both worlds and kind of connecting them, and you know, it is fascinating. I mean, one of the I have a little appendix in this book about tips for different types of dreaming, and one of them is, you know, to, especially if you have a significant event, excuse me, in your daily life, is to look at it as if it were a dream. How would you, what symbols speak to you? What aspects speak to you? So, and I did take that on, and I do that, as a matter of fact, just kind of look at events or things that people say to me in almost like in a dreamlike way. And I don't mean that in a dreamy way, but in a way of like, okay, what are they saying beneath those words? And how does that, you know, symbolically speaking, what are they saying to me? And how is this relating? And so I have a whole new appreciation, I think, of living and of dreaming, both. They're connected.
No doubt about that. They feed into each other. And
yeah.
With the polar bears, you talked about how they believe that the Earth is going through evolutionary changes. What can we expect? Make a few predictions based on your dreams with the polar bears.
I would say the polar bears are telling us to wake up, really to wake up, to reconnect with nature, with other animals, with the Earth, and with our deeper selves, to really discover who we are. I think I don't know if I have a prediction for you, but I think we are very easily going to diversions and, you know, all kinds of superficialities, and which removes us from who we really are. You know, we begin to wear these masks of who we think that we should be, or who other people will, you know, honor or like, or this or that. I mean, it's a lot of craziness going on. And I say this because the elections are so big here in Alaska right now, and we get called like every night a few times with people saying this, that, or the other, and I'm thinking, this is insane. You know, it's just really insane what's going on. I think the polar bears are a great symbol for that, because they live in the Arctic. They live away from all these diversions and all these superficialities, and they're very much about movement, about walking, about deepening our connections with the Earth. So I think that's what's going to, you know, save us or not. Yeah.
Have you ever thought about going to the Arctic, trying to track down one of these polar bears?
I did. Yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah, and I could, you know, but it's just, and there was a period of time where I was putting together a trip, and you know, I kind of got a message from my dream, which is, it's not necessary. You're connecting with us this way, and that's what we're talking about. And I think that was actually really good advice, because if I had gone, you know, up to northern Alaska and took pictures and stuff and interacted that way, I would have had a very different experience. And the polar bears really wanted to connect via, or you know, my polar bears, via dreams and via this particular path that they had. Kind of, you know, it was their party, so to speak. So, but I would still like to do that. You know, who wouldn't?
Of course. We always get the traveling bug on my end. I think it would be great. You know, you have Bering Strait, that special relationship bear, and you think to yourself, okay, he has a scar under his right eye. I'm going to the Arctic to find this bear with the scar, and that's how I know this is true right here. I just think it's so interesting. I wish there was ways we can make it more tangible and with with some type of validity there for the person that needs that tangible proof, so to speak.
Yeah, but you know what? People who need the tangible proof, they're always going to want more.
Is that the truth?
Through this over and over again with animal communication, I've just learned to say, if it doesn't fit for you, it doesn't fit for you, and that's okay. It just is. There's some people who you just can't prove anything to, and that's how it is.
Yeah, so. I couldn't agree more with you. And do the polar bears up and leave you, or they're still contacting you?
When the book came out, which wasn't too long ago, a number of weeks ago, I had a dream, and I had kind of a little congratulations dream, and celebration dream. But in general, when the book ends, kind of, with things winding down, and yeah, that was very much a kind of a letting go, and they were on to other things, I was on to other things, so there was kind of a little break there, and part of me was sad, but part of me was, how many years can you spend with dreaming with polar bears? I guess you could spend your life doing it, but I guess for me there's other things to be doing, so yeah.
No, of course, and it really is such an enjoyable book, and it's such a quick read, and before, my listeners, quite frankly, would kill me if I didn't ask you to give them some tips, because I've gotten a bunch of emails and contacts, people asking me to do a dream show, and they're always saying, I never remember my dreams. Never, ever. And I tell them, that's crazy, you're just not, you're not doing these strategies that you can think of. Give some people some techniques to remember their dreams, and then maybe even take it the next step with co-dreaming.
Okay, well, I would say I have 3 appendixes in the back, and one is about basically how to engage your dreams, one's about co-dreaming, and one's about integrating our dreams with our waking life. And they're just really simple little things, 10 points each. So basically, with remembering your dreams, I think you need to do what feels right to you, what's going to work for you. If you have the idea of telling yourself before you go to bed, I really want to remember my dreams, I would say it respectfully. I think the dream world, our subconscious, if we want it to respect us, we need to respect it. So, for some people, it might be elaborate, making a little dream altar, or writing in your journal, I want to remember my dreams, or putting out some kind of special little statue. And on the other end of it, on waking up, I would say write down whatever you can remember, even if it's just a feeling. Sometimes we have to start with the little threads that we get, just the feeling from a dream, or a word from a dream. And the more you do that, and you probably realized it if you've just been, if you've been doing it for the past year, keeping a dream log, the more you do it, the clearer and the more you remember your dreams. It just becomes, it becomes a relationship. It becomes entrained. I think that's really helpful. I know that sounds really simple, but it's a matter of doing it every day, huh?
Yeah.
Doing it every night before you go to bed, and kind of being vigilant about it, and writing it down, and being open, I think, too. I think we sometimes tend to judge our dreams, and if you have a kind of this attitude of, oh, dreams are silly, but I'm going to try to remember anyway, well, you're sort of starting at a disadvantage there. So I would say ask your subconscious to help you remember, and do what feels right to you there. In terms of co-dreaming, I would say it's really necessary to have a good foundation of your own dreaming world first. So learn from your dreams, interact with your dreams, play with lucidity, play with different, there's all kinds of different little exercises you can do. Do you remember the Carlos Castaneda one, where Don Juan would always tell Carlos Castaneda to try to find his hands in his dream? And that's a great one. If you can try to do that, you start setting up this little, these little tests and challenges for yourself, and you become more fluid in your dreams. You are able to do different things and to bring things back, and so there's a lot of little different ideas there. Anyway, in terms of co-dreaming, I would say once you have a good solid foundation with your dream world and with your dream guides, actually I should just pop in there and say, that's another way, is if you can imagine that you have dream guides, ask them to help you. dream guides, help me remember my dreams. I say it out loud, but then I talk to animals, so it's not so strange for me.
Everybody around you is just used to you just talking out loud, and nobody knows if you're actually talking to them. So it must be a lot of fun for you at the same time, I would imagine. You can mess with people wherever you go, essentially. But before we let you go, I know you probably are thinking of a million different things to write about right now, possibly. And I know this is a brand spanking new book, and it really is wonderful. It's a great resource for dreaming and co-dreaming. Do you have any ideas of what you're going to do next? I'm assuming it's going to be something with animals.
It'll probably be something with animals. I'm not really sure yet. I'm still kind of in that simmering stage where ideas are coming to me, and I'm always looking for, it's kind of the idea of what book would like to write itself through me, So I'm looking for something that connects. I'm looking for something that speaks deeply to me and that I can align with and hopefully do the best job I can with expressing that.
Absolutely wonderful. You keep doing the same type of books with the last one. It really is enjoyable, and it's going to be a great one. I know you have a free newsletter. Tell people your social media sites before we let you go so listeners can get a copy of the newsletter and contact you if they want to connect.
Sure. My website is animalvoices.net, and you can sign up for the newsletter there. It's twice monthly, and you can learn about buying the book there. There's a lot of excerpts, and not only from this book, from my other books about connecting with animals and communicating with animals. So that's really the best place to go, animalvoices.net. And you can reach me via email that way too. And if you're interested in animal talk, that's you can reach me that way too as well.
And I hope you stay warm out there in Alaska.
I will.
All right, Dawn, it is such a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Thanks so much.
Catch us again next week, same day, same time as always, Monday, November 10th, 2014, 7 to 8 p.m., with a special guest, Indigo Child, new subject which we haven't talked about, Jess Larson, who was also featured on a recent episode of Ghost Inside My Child. For paranormal updates, daily, weekly, the whole shebang, go to our website, shadowsoftheparanormal.com, as well as our Facebook page, /Shadows of the Paranormal. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Misguided Souls with Shadows of the Paranormal. I'm Brian Turnoff on Z Talk Radio. Have an absolutely wonderful night.